Nearly 28 years ago, a blazing fire engulfed ValuJet Flight 592 as it plummeted into the Florida Everglades, taking the lives of 110 passengers and crew. Flames consumed the aircraft in a terrifying inferno, triggering panic and screams amid the thick smoke. Lives were tragically lost, dreams shattered, and families torn apart in a devastating sequence of events. This remains the deadliest plane crash in Florida's history. What caused this tragic crash? Still a haunting chapter in Florida's past. May 11, 1996, ValuJet Airlines Flight 592 was a regularly scheduled flight operating between Miami International Airport, MIA, and Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, ATL, in Georgia. The aircraft selected for this service was a 27-year-old McDonnell Douglas DC-932 bearing the registration N904VJ. Initially slated for departure at 13:01, the flight experienced a delay due to the aircraft's tardy arrival from Atlanta, touching down at 13:10. While stationed in Miami, the aircraft underwent cargo loading operations, which encompassed company-owned material, COMAT, including a nose tire, 2 main landing gear tires, and 5 boxes marked as oxycanisters empty. The flight plan dictated a climb to an altitude of 35,000 feet for the anticipated 1 hour and 32-minute journey back to Atlanta. ValuJet, an American airline, was a complete disaster waiting to happen. Their security standards were shockingly poor, leading employees like pilots and flight attendants to quit due to serious safety concerns. Working for ValuJet was practically like signing a death wish. Between 1993 and 1997, the airline gained notoriety for its dreadful safety record and failure to address significant issues. Some officials at the Federal Aviation Administration had pushed to ground the airline as early as 1994. Then came May 11, 1996, when ValuJet Flight 592 crashed into the Florida Everglades, claiming 110 lives. ValuJet, a relatively new budget airline, began operations on October 26, 1993, during a time when several airlines were popping up across the United States. They mainly operated older planes like the McDonnell Douglas DC-9, which had been phased out by other airlines, despite once being a popular choice. Did you know that the DC-9 had a troubled history, with over 15% of the planes ever built being lost, resulting in over 3,500 fatalities? ValuJet operated a total of 44 of these planes. The ValuJet Flight 592, with over 80,000 flight cycles, was piloted by Captain Kantalin Kubek, age 35, from California, with nearly 9,000 total flying hours, over 2,000 of which were in the DC-9. Her co-pilot, Richard Hazen, age 52, had nearly 12,000 flying hours. They both had roughly the same amount of experience flying the DC-9. Upon arrival in Miami, the plane was delayed for just over an hour due to mechanical issues. Additionally, it had experienced earlier delays in Atlanta due to unexpected maintenance involving the circuit breaker and a reported issue with the left fuel flow gauge. The autopilot had been reported defective for days, and the public address system had also malfunctioned on a previous flight. A mechanic in Miami attempted to troubleshoot the problems, but they couldn't be resolved. Despite this, the plane was cleared to continue flying. With 105 passengers and a total of 110 people on board, along with baggage and additional cargo, including 144 chemical oxygen generators, the flight departed. These generators, meant to supply oxygen in emergencies, were improperly stored and labeled. They were placed in cardboard boxes without proper safety measures, leading to an increased risk of accidental activation. Despite ValuJet's hazardous materials policy, which did not permit the transportation of such items, the generators were loaded onto Flight 592 without proper inspection. The airline faced controversy from the start, boasting about paying their workers poorly. They even made their pilots foot the bill for their in-flight training and provided minimal training for flight attendants. Furthermore, they demanded excessively long hours from their employees. Legal disputes with airlines like TWA and Delta over landing slots and outsourcing much of their ground services added to their troubles. Did you know that in the 12 months leading up to the Flight 592 accident, another ValuJet plane had suffered a catastrophic engine failure after an aborted takeoff, resulting in a major cabin fire Thankfully, there were no fatalities. Despite being aware of the problem, ValuJet didn't address it due to budget constraints continuing to operate the plane. Just 7 months before Flight 592, another ValuJet DC-9 experienced a hard landing in Nashville due to pilot error, injuring 5 people. Maintenance irregularities were also reported, including a plane with a faulty hydraulic system flown 140 times before it was fixed. Between 1994 and the day of the Flight 592 accident, there were 129 emergency landings made at ValuJet, indicating a deeply troubling safety record. Operating out of their base in Atlanta, Georgia, ValuJet's planes were older than those of most competitors, adding to safety concerns. On May 11, 1996, after a long wait in Miami, Flight 592 finally left the gate around 1:40 p.m. and headed to runway 9L. At 2:03, air traffic control said it was okay for the plane to take off. The initial spark, which could have been anything flammable in the cargo hold, like the boxes holding the oxygen generators, might have caused nearby tires to catch fire too, making toxic smoke. Heat from the oxygen generators getting hot once activated is a big factor in fires. Pilots suspected something was wrong when they heard a bang in the cockpit, thinking there might not be enough oxygen. By 2:10 p.m., investigators thought the fire had spread from the cargo compartment but hadn't reached the cabin yet. The bang they heard was one of the tires in the front cargo compartment blowing up, suggesting the fire had been going for a while without anyone noticing. If there had been fire detection equipment in the cargo hold, it might have given the pilot more time. Captain Candelink Kubik found an electrical issue with the plane. Shortly after, the cockpit recorder caught sounds of fire and smoke in the cabin, along with scared passengers. The flight crew asked to go back to Miami Airport, and someone requested oxygen masks for passengers. The fire on board was messing up the flight controls. At 2:11 p.m., just 38 seconds later, Captain Kubik asked for the nearest airport, knowing they probably couldn't make it back to Miami. That was the last message from the plane. It's likely that toxic smoke filled the cockpit and cabin, knocking out the pilots. The cockpit recorder only picked up sounds of air and system tones, with radio messages showing the plane was nose down. The crash killed 110 people, only about 10 minutes into the flight. The National Transportation Safety Board found that the fire in the cargo hold started because of improperly packed oxygen generators. ValuJet didn't keep a close eye on SaberTech's work, and SaberTech didn't make sure there were smoke detectors in all the cargo compartments. The FAA also didn't do enough to check how ValuJet and companies like SaberTech were doing their maintenance. After the crash, the FAA stopped ValuJet from flying on June 11, 1996. They did start flying again on September 26th, but with fewer planes after following FAA rules. Can you imagine what happened next? The bad press caused ValuJet to lose a lot of money and eventually merge with another airline, AirTran. Did you know that the tragedy had a big impact on air safety rules for years to come? They made a bunch of recommendations, like 33 of them, and the FAA agreed to follow 29. After that, the number of accidental deaths in the air dropped by a lot, but some people still think that airlines, especially with costs going up, care more about making money than keeping things safe. And the government doesn't always have enough resources to make sure they're doing the right thing. Looking at the numbers over the next 10 years, flying got safer. There were those terrible attacks on September 11, 2001, which weren't accidents, and another crash in New York a couple of months later. But even with those, there were only 10 fatal incidents in 25 years with 488 deaths. To put that in perspective, just in Florida in 2019, over 3,000 people died in car crashes. Although ValuJet acquired AirTran Airways in Florida and underwent a name change, Southwest later acquired them. The maintenance company, SaberTech, that loaded the oxygen canisters on Flight 592 was in big trouble. They were charged with a bunch of serious crimes, but ended up being convicted of not training their employees properly and not handling dangerous materials right. They had to pay a fine, but they were already out of business by then. They put up a monument along Tamiami Trail where the rescue efforts were based. It was designed by students from the University of Miami and has 110 stone pillars in the shape of an arrow, pointing to where the plane went down in the Everglades. At the tip of the arrow, there's a marker with the names of the people who died. Do you believe air travel is now significantly safer than it used to be? Could this tragic accident have been prevented with proper precautions in place? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.